The night is gentle, and it is yours. Imagine standing at the edge of the river Nile, the water moving with a quiet rhythm, silvered by the light of a full moon that seems older than memory itself. The air is warm, not heavy, but soft as if it wraps you in a blanket woven from desert sands and the faint scent of papyrus reeds. The hum of crickets blends with distant voices, the easy murmur of families finishing their suppers in clay-walled homes, laughter softened by the thick night air. A breeze touches your face, carrying with it the fragrance of baked bread, mingling with the smoke from small fires that glow like stars scattered on the ground. You are in ancient Egypt, not as a distant observer, not reading from a scroll of history, but as someone living here, along the banks of this eternal river. It is evening, and your work is finished. The day's labor in the fields is behind you, or perhaps the loom rests silent in the corner of your dwelling. Children curl against their mothers, old men lean on carved wooden staffs, and somewhere nearby, a woman hums a song that her mother sang to her when she was small. It is a song that speaks of gods and goddesses, of love and betrayal, of death and rebirth. Stories like these are not written for distant scholars, but for people like you, for the villagers who turn their eyes to the stars and wonder, who see the cycles of the river and ask what they mean. This world is full of questions, and myths are answers painted with colors brighter than truth alone could manage. They are not only entertainment, but companions. They whisper that life has a rhythm, that suffering is meaning, and that love, even when struck down, can rise again. You sit near the firelight, the sparks rising into the night like small prayers. The sand is cool beneath your feet. Perhaps you are a woman, your hands calloused from grinding grain, your arms strong from carrying water. Or perhaps you are a man, shoulders aching from the harvest, skin browned by long days beneath the sun. It does not matter which. What matters is that here, in this village, you are part of a story older than memory, and tonight you will hear it told once again. The story of Isis and Osiris. It is not only the tale of gods, but a reflection of your own heart, of your neighbors, of the river that feeds you, and the fields that sustain you. Osiris, the just king, whose wisdom brings order. Isis, the devoted wife and mother, whose love surpasses even death. Set, the jealous brother, restless and violent. Nephthys, shadowed and loyal, torn between blood and conscience. These are not merely distant divinities. They are mirrors of human struggles. Their joys and their wounds echo in your own. As the fire flickers, you lean closer. An elder clears her throat, perhaps your grandmother, or a neighbor with wrinkles carved deep as river channels. Her voice is steady, though softened by time. She begins with words you know, words carried through generations. Once there was harmony in the land, once there was peace. And you let the rhythm of her voice carry you, steady as the Nile's current. Myths like this are not simply stories. They are the threads that hold life together. For Egyptians, they explain why the river flooded and receded, why we grew, why storms came, and why, after death, there might be hope. When you lose someone you love, when the world feels uncertain, when envy darkens even the brightest days, these are the times when the tale of Isis and Osiris returns to comfort you. Imagine lying back, your head resting on cool woven reeds, listening as the night folds around you. The stars above are so many they almost seem to hum, constellations shifting into shapes you half recognize. You feel the presence of thousands of lives before you, generations who sat just as you sit now, who whispered these same names into the dark. Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, Horus. Their stories lived in the air, in the rhythm of songs, in the walls of temples, in the scratch of chisel against stone. They lived in the hopes of mothers who feared losing their children, in the prayers of farmers who begged the Nile to rise, in the hearts of lovers who promised their devotion would endure beyond the grave. And in this moment, you are one of them. You are Egyptian, The beauty of myths is not only in the telling but in the sharing. Around this fire, you are not alone. Others lean close, their eyes reflecting the flames. Some know the story well and nod at each familiar turn, others listen wide-eyed, hearing it for the first time. The tale binds you together. It reminds you that life, whether in prosperity or hardship, is never only your own to carry. It is woven with countless others, each thread connected. The elder pauses now and then, letting silence fall like soft sand, giving you time to feel the truth behind the words. The fire crackles. The Nile whispers. Somewhere, a baby stirs and then sighs back into sleep. You are awake, but you are drifting too, your mind carried by the current of the story. Think of Isis, the goddess who would one day search the earth for her beloved, her devotion fierce as the sun. Think of Osiris, the king who brought wisdom and order only to be torn away. Think of Set, whose jealousy is so sharp it wounds even the gods. Already you sense the shape of the tale, the rise and fall, the sorrow and the hope. You know it will take you through darkness and into light again. And that is why you stay close, why you let the words settle deep into your heart. Why do we need stories? Perhaps you have asked yourself that as you stare at the stars. Is it not enough to live, to eat, to work, to sleep? Yet the heart longs for more. It longs to understand, to find meaning in the endless cycles of day and night. Flood and drought, birth and death. Without stories, life feels bare. With them, life feels whole. The Egyptians knew this well. And so they told their tales, night after night, letting each generation sip from the well of memory. Tonight you drink from that well too. The water is cool, ancient, and it fills you with calm. As the story unfolds, you are invited not only to listen but to feel. To step inside the sandals of those who lived before, to see the world through their eyes, to breathe their air. You are here not as a scholar, but as a neighbor, a friend, a mother, a father, a child. You are human, fragile and strong, yearning and afraid, hopeful and tired. Just as they were. Just as Isis was. Just as Osiris was, the night deepens. The moon rises higher, painting the Nile with silver. Shadows stretch long across the desert, but they do not feel threatening. They are soft, like curtains closing. Soon, the story will draw you deeper, carrying you to the golden days of Osiris's reign, to the peace that once was and the sorrow that followed. But for now, you rest in this beginning, on the threshold of myth and memory. You breathe in. You breathe out. You listen. And the tale of Isis and Osiris begins. The sun has set and risen again, and a new day unfolds along the banks of the Nile. Imagine yourself waking in a small mud brick house. The walls cool in the early morning before the heat of the sun seeps into every stone and surface. You stretch your body from a bed of woven reeds, brush the fine grains of sand from your arms, and listen to the sounds of life beginning around you. A donkey brays in the distance, a rooster calls, and already the rhythmic scrape of a quern stone can be heard as women grind grain into flour for bread. This is your world, simple, cyclical, and deeply tied to the river that winds like a blue thread through the desert. The Nile is not only water, it is life. It floods, it retreats, and it leaves behind rich black soil where green shoots rise against the gold of the sand. Without it, there would be nothing but emptiness. With it, there is bread, beer, papyrus, and the steady heartbeat of a civilization. You walk outside into the light of morning. The sun, already strong, touches your skin with warmth. Across the fields, men stoop low, tending to wheat and barley, their bodies moving in unison like reeds in the wind. They use simple tools, hoes carved from wood, blades of copper, baskets woven from palm. Each movement is familiar, passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter, just as reliable as the rising sun. If you are a woman, your day is different, but no less vital. Perhaps you begin with bread baking, mixing ground grain with water, shaping it into flat loaves, baking them against the walls of clay ovens. The smell fills the air, comforting and sustaining the same aroma that has greeted generations before you. Or perhaps you sit at a loom, weaving linen threads into cloth that will clothe your family, protect them from the sun, or wrap a newborn child. Your fingers move with practiced ease, the work as steady as your breath. Children tumble in the dust outside, their laughter high and bright as the morning sun. They chase one another, play with small carved toys of animals and boats, or help carry small jars of water from the river. Some learn from their fathers in the fields, others from their mothers in the courtyard. All are part of the rhythm, absorbed into the daily dance of survival and continuity. Life is not without its trials. Childbirth is dangerous, hunger always hovers close, and illness can come suddenly. Yet Egyptians do not live in despair. They live with faith. In every prayer, in every gesture, in every offering placed before a small household shrine, there is the hope that the gods are watching, listening and protecting. A carved amulet, perhaps in the shape of an eye or a scarab, might hang from your neck to ward away harm. A whispered prayer to Isis might be offered before childbirth, asking her to keep both mother and child safe. For women, Isis is not an abstract figure carved in stone temples. She is present, tangible, a goddess who knows what it means to weep, to love, to endure. You feel her nearness when you hold your child, when you wait for your husband to return safely from the fields, when you kneel beside a sick loved one. Isis, who once scoured the land to find the pieces of her beloved Osiris, understands grief. Isis, who nursed her son Horus in secret, understands motherhood. She is not distant. She is yours. The Nile continues its steady flow, and with it comes ritual. Farmers pause to offer small tokens at the water's edge, a handful of grain, a whispered word of gratitude. Women leave offerings of flowers or bread at shrines, trusting that the gods see their devotion. Life is hard, yes, but it is not hopeless, for the people believe they are not alone in their struggle. Their myths weave through their days like threads of gold in a linen cloth, giving shine and meaning to what otherwise might seem only toil. At midday, the sun blazes fiercely. You find shade beneath a palm or in the coolness of your home. The air is filled with the hum of insects, the calls of birds, the lowing of cattle driven to the river for water. Work slows in the heat, but it never fully stops. Even in rest, you prepare, mending nets, patching baskets, telling stories to children whose eyes grow heavy in the warmth. And always, the stories return to Isis and Osiris. They are as familiar as the stars that wheel overhead each night. Children know them, elders repeat them, and each retelling carries a new lesson. When you hear of Isis's tireless search, you think of your own perseverance in hardship. When you hear of Osiris's gentle kingship, you think of the justice you long for in your own rulers. When you hear of Set's jealousy, you remember the dangers of envy in your village. These are not only tales, they are guides, teachers, companions. As evening comes, the Nile glows with the fading light of the sun, turning gold and crimson before settling into shadow. Families gather again, bread shared, beer poured, voices low with both fatigue and affection. The firelight flickers, and once more the stories rise. An elder might recount how Osiris taught the people farming and law, how Isis's wisdom brought comfort, how Horus grew strong under his mother's care. And as you listen, you feel the connection, not only to the divine, but to one another. Women nod knowingly when Isis's devotion is praised, men listen quietly when Osiris's fairness is remembered. Children sit wide-eyed when the darker parts are told, clutching at their mother's hands as if seeking the same protection Horus once received. The story belongs to everyone, but it feels most intimate to women, who see their own lives reflected in Isis's love, her resilience, her pain. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe in the scent of smoke, bread, and river reeds. You let the sounds of the night seep into you, the murmur of voices, the gentle slap of water against boats, the sigh of wind through palms. And you realize, life here is hard, but it is also beautiful. It is shared, it is cyclical, it is meaningful. The God is near. The stories are alive. The Nile flows, as it always has, as it always will. Can you imagine yourself there, with the river breeze on your face? Tell me, if you lived then, what role might you have played in this story-filled land? The fire burns low, its glow warm against the night. You lean closer, your knees drawn up, your eyes fixed on the elder whose voice guides the story. The air is heavy with the scent of smoke and reeds, the sound of the Nile a constant hush in the background, as though the river itself listens to every word. Tonight, the tale deepens, moving from the simple rhythms of life into the world of the divine. The gods, for Egyptians, are not distant beings watching from the heavens. They are present, walking alongside you in every field, in every birth, in every storm. Their lives echo yours, but on a grander scale. Their love feels familiar. Their quarrels remind you of neighbors. Their joys and betrayals touch wounds you already know. And so when you hear their names, you feel a closeness, as though they were kin. Isis, Osiris, Set, Nephthys. These four siblings form the heart of the story, a divine family whose lives are as entangled as any you have seen in your village. First comes Osiris. You picture him tall and steady, his skin green like the fertile earth after the flood, a crown upon his brow shaped like the white crown of Upper Egypt. He is no stranger to you. Osiris is the king who taught your ancestors to sow grain and brew beer, who brought law to guide justice and rituals to guide the soul. He represents what you long for most: order, peace, balance. When you think of Osiris, you think of the good harvest, the fairness of a ruler who listens, the gentle rhythm of life kept in harmony. And at his side, Isis. Always Isis. Her beauty is not only in her form, but in her presence, patient, wise, nurturing. She is the mother who comforts, the wife who stands steadfast, the healer who whispers words of power over wounds. To you, Isis is more than a goddess. She is the echo of every woman who has ever held her child close or waited by the river for her husband to return. She is divine, but she is not unreachable. When you say her name, you feel warmth in your chest, as if a mother's hand rested there. Together, Isis and Osiris are harmony itself. They balance one another, like the Nile's flood and retreat, like day and night. Their love is not a passing flame, but a steady light, the kind that comforts more than it dazzles. You imagine them ruling together, guiding the people, their voices blending as one. For Egyptians, theirs is the model of unity, a vision of what life can be when order and care move hand in hand. But harmony has its shadow. Where there is light, darkness waits. Enter Set, brother to Osiris, but opposite in every way. If Osiris is calm, Set is storm. If Osiris builds, Set destroys. His skin is the color of dust, his hair like fire, and his form part human, part beast, never fully one or the other. Some say he is the god of storms, of chaos, of the desert winds that scour the land and strip the fields bare. Others whisper of his jealousy, of how Osiris's reign fills him not with pride, but with bitterness. You understand this feeling. Perhaps you have seen it in your village, when one brother prospers and another feels forgotten. Maybe you've felt it yourself, a tightening in your chest when someone else is praised while your own efforts go unseen. The Egyptians knew it too, which is why Set is not only a god but a reflection of something all too human. And then there is Nephthys, the shadow between light and darkness. Sister to Isis, wife to Set. She is harder to grasp. Her presence is quieter, her role less sung. Yet she is there, a figure of loyalty tangled in conflict. She loves her sister, yet she is bound to her husband. She belongs to Set's house, yet her heart leans toward Isis's pain. To many Egyptians, she is like the night, mysterious, veiled, and filled with both fear and comfort. Together, these four form a family as complex as any you have known. Love and jealousy, loyalty and betrayal, all woven tightly together. They are gods, yes, but when you hear their story, you cannot help but think of your own kin, your own neighbors, your own heart. The elder pauses, her voice lingering on the names, letting them settle in the air. Around you, others shift closer. Some nod knowingly, as if they have lived these emotions themselves. Children glance at one another, wide-eyed, for they sense that gods who fight are gods who feel, and gods who feel are closer to them than stars could ever be. You are told of the harmony between Isis and Osiris, their reign golden and just, their partnership strong. And you are told of the bitterness in Set's chest, the way Indy eats at him like rot in a grain store. You feel the tension rising already, though the betrayal has not yet come. It is the tension you know in life, the moment before an argument breaks, the silence before a storm. Stories often reflect truths about families, don't they? If you've ever seen love and jealousy side by side, you'll feel the weight of this tale. Isis and Osiris stand as proof that love can bring order and abundance. They are the dream of what family can be, supportive, faithful, enduring. Yet Set reminds you that love and order are never safe from Indy. His presence warns that chaos always waits just beyond the horizon. And Nephthys, she reminds you of the quiet ones, caught in between, trying to hold loyalty in both hands, though one is always bound to slip away. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe deeply. You can almost see them. Osiris in his crown, Isis with her wings outstretched, Set with eyes burning, Nephthys cloaked in shadow. They are grand, yes, but they are also familiar. For what are they if not reflections of us? A husband and wife, a jealous brother, a sister torn between love and duty. The fire pops, sending sparks into the air. You lean into the story, feeling its weight pressed gently against your heart. You understand now why these tales endure. They are not only about gods and magic, but about you, about your family, about every heart that has ever beaten with love or envy, loyalty or doubt. The story will soon move forward, into betrayal, into grief, into journeys across the land. But for now, you sit with a family of four, their names etched into your memory, their struggles as human as they are divine. You let the thought settle. Even gods are not free from rivalry, from jealousy, from love so deep it defies death. And you realize this is why you listen, not to escape your world, but to understand it more fully. The tale carries you forward now, deeper into the heart of memory, into a time spoken of with reverence and longing. The golden reign of Osiris. A time when Egypt, your Egypt, thrived in peace and plenty, when the river flowed in rhythm with the people's hearts, and when balance seemed as steady as the stars themselves. Close your eyes and imagine it. The Nile, full and generous, flooding its banks with black silt that glistened under the sun. Fields stretched wide, green with barley and wheat, swaying softly like a sea of gold as they ripened. Date palms bent beneath the weight of their fruit. Fish leapt in the river, flocks of birds circled overhead, and cattle grazed in pastures so rich it seemed as though the land itself smiled. Hunger was not forgotten. Egyptians knew it always lingered in the edges of memory. But in these days, it was quiet, subdued, kept at bay by Osiris's wisdom. For Osiris was more than a ruler. He was a teacher, a guide. When people speak of him, they do not only speak of crowns and thrones, they speak of fields, of law, of the sacred way of life. It was said he taught your ancestors to plant seed in rows, to use the plow, to harvest with fairness, so that no one was left empty-handed. He taught them the brewing of beer, golden and nourishing, the drink that soothed thirst and lifted spirits. He showed them how to build granaries, to store grain for leaner times, so that famine need not strike so cruelly. Justice, too, was Osiris's gift. Before him, the world was untamed, harsh, each family guarding what little it had with suspicion. But under Osiris, disputes were settled with fairness. Truth weighed like grain upon the scale. To hear his judgment was to feel that order, Ma'at, the balance of the universe, had been restored. You could almost hear his voice, calm and steady, never raised in anger but firm enough to quiet conflict. In your village, when quarrels rise, you wish such a voice could be heard again. And then there were the rituals, the ways of honoring the gods and ensuring the eternal cycle of life. Osiris guided his people not only in survival but in meaning. He taught them songs of praise, offerings to place before altars, prayers whispered into the dawn. He showed them how to mark the turning of seasons, how to honor birth and death with reverence, how to trust that beyond the veil of this world lay another, one where justice would reign still. His reign was not simply over fields and courts, but over the soul of Egypt itself. Life in these days felt abundant. You imagine yourself waking at dawn, stepping out into the cool mist rising from the river. The air smells of damp earth, rich and fertile, a scent promising harvest. You walk to the fields, your feet pressing into soft soil, and you know that the crops will grow, that the Nile has blessed you again this year. At midday, the scent of baking bread drifts from ovens, loaves thick and warm, their crusts browned by fire. You break bread with your family, you drink beer brewed from barley, and you give thanks, knowing these gifts come through the order Osiris has brought. In the evening, you join others at the temple. The torches flicker against painted walls, where images of gods stretch tall and serene. The air is sweet with incense, the murmured prayers rise like smoke, and you feel a stillness settle inside you. Life is not easy, no life is, but it feels guided, purposeful, touched by the divine. This is what the golden rain means. Not perfection, not the absence of hardship, but the presence of balance. The certainty that for each struggle there is comfort, for each drought there is flood, for each sorrow there is joy. Osiris embodies this rhythm, and the people feel secure beneath his reign, as children feel secure beneath a father's watchful gaze. You picture him beside Isis, their harmony radiating outward like sunlight. Together they are the heart of Egypt, embodying not only love but the promise that life, when guided with wisdom and compassion, can flourish. Osiris leads with fairness, Isis nurtures with wisdom. Their bond strengthens the people, reminding them of what family, what loyalty, what devotion should look like. And yet, even as you let yourself sink into this vision, you know, deep within, how fragile harmony can be. Balance, though steady, is never guaranteed. A field left untended can wither. A heart left envious can fester. Even in the days of Osiris's reign, shadows lingered at the edges, though people may not have seen them clearly. For where harmony shines brightest, jealousy often casts its deepest shadow. Still, for now, you remain in this moment. The golden rain is before you, vivid and serene. You stand in the fields, watching green stems sway in the breeze. You hear children's laughter echo down the village path, their small feet kicking up dust as they run. You smell the sweet, yeasty air of baking bread, the earthy scent of tilled soil, the perfume of lotus blossoms floating on the river. You feel the warmth of the sun on your shoulders, the reassurance of Osiris's order in your heart. This, the elders say, is how life was meant to be. This, they say, is the dream of Egypt, the reign of Osiris, where prosperity blooms, where justice guides, where rituals connect earth to heaven. And though you live far from palaces or courts, you feel his touch in every harvest, in every prayer, in every moment of peace you share with your family. When life feels balanced, we often forget how fragile harmony can be. What would you wish to preserve if you lived in Osiris's Egypt? The days of harmony, like golden threads woven into cloth, can unravel when a darker hand tugs at the edges. Where there is prosperity, there is always one who feels shut out of its glow. And so, in the story of Isis and Osiris, the shadow takes shape in Set, brother to Osiris, yet never able to bear his light. At first, it may have been a quiet resentment. Imagine Set watching from the margins as Osiris walked among the people, beloved, honored, and praised. Every harvest, every judgment, every prayer lifted Osiris higher in the hearts of the Egyptians, and in equal measure, jealousy pressed heavier on Set's chest. He, too, was powerful, but his power was stormy, chaotic, difficult to love. For what farmer, after all, prays for the desert wind that burns their crops? What mother calls upon chaos to watch over her children? Osiris gave order, Isis gave care, and together they held the love of the people. Where then was Set's place? Jealousy has a way of growing silently, like a creeping vine, until one day it chokes everything in its path. Set's heart twisted as he watched feasts in Osiris's honor, as he saw neighbors share bread in peace, as he heard laughter echo in temples built to honor his brother's reign. Each sound of joy was, to him, a reminder of his own bitterness. And in that bitterness, he began to plot. The story says that Set devised a plan, clever in its cruelty. He ordered a chest to be built, a thing of beauty, rich with cedar wood, inlaid with shining metals, crafted to fit one form and one form only, that of Osiris. The chest gleamed like treasure, and when Set looked upon it, he must have smiled, for he knew it was not meant to hold riches but to trap a king. He prepared a great banquet, inviting Osiris and many guests. Picture the scene: torches burning low, platters of roasted meat, and sweet figs spread upon the table, cups of beer flowing freely. Laughter rang in the air, music rose from strings and flutes, and amid the merriment, the chest was brought forth. Its polished sides reflected the firelight, and a hush fell over the gathering as Set declared it a gift for whomever might fit inside. One by one, guests tried, laughing as they lay within it, but the chest was always too long or too narrow. Then Osiris, smiling with the ease of one who has nothing to fear, stepped forward. The chest seemed to welcome him, as if shaped by destiny itself, and when he lay inside, it closed around him as snug as the womb. That was the moment Set had been waiting for. With a signal, his allies rushed forward. The lid slammed shut, iron nails hammered down, molten lead poured over the seams. The laughter died, the music faltered, replaced by cries of horror. The chest became a coffin, Osiris's body sealed within, and Set ordered it cast into the Nile. The lifeblood of Egypt now turned to a grave. Imagine the shock, the sharp fracture that split the harmony of the land. Isis's heart shattered. She was not only a goddess but a wife, a woman who had loved with devotion, who had walked beside her husband in every step of life. To see him betrayed not by a stranger, but by his own brother must have been agony beyond words. She wailed, and her cries echoed through the villages, carried on the night wind, until every mother, every sister, every daughter felt her grief as though it were their own. In the villages, fear spread like smoke. The people who had trusted Osiris's wisdom now trembled. If the beloved king could be struck down by treachery, what safety was left for ordinary families? The Nile, once seen as their source of life, now seemed ominous, its waters hiding the body of their protector. Farmers looked to their fields with unease, mothers clutched their children closer, and at night the stories told by firelight grew hushed, shadowed by sorrow. Isis, however, did not collapse into despair. Though her heart was pierced with grief, she became the embodiment of devotion. She roamed the banks of the Nile, searching for the chest, calling out her husband's name. Her steps were heavy, but her resolve unbroken. In every bend of the river, in every reed and lotus, she sought a sign of him. To ordinary women, She was more than divine. She was a mirror of their own love and loss, their own desperate strength to keep searching when hope seemed faint. The story lingers on her grief because it is a grief everyone understands. Betrayal cuts deeper when it comes from family, and loss aches sharper when it steals not only a loved one, but the sense of safety that love gave. You can almost feel Isis's tears soaking into the sand, hear her voice breaking as she calls into the night. Her sorrow becomes your own, reminding you of the tender threads that bind us all, threads so easily torn, yet so fiercely mended by devotion. And as you picture her wandering, veil trailing in the dust, you sense the atmosphere of Egypt itself shifting. Once filled with laughter, the air now carried whispers of dread. Once abundant with bread and beer, meals were taken in silence, with eyes glancing to the river in fear. For when a god-king is torn from his throne, it is not only a family that suffers, it is a people. Even in myths, betrayal hurts. If you've ever felt the sting of envy or loss, you'll know how this part of the story aches. The river has always been a place of life in Egypt, but for Isis, it became a place of mourning. After the cruel betrayal of Set, after the coffin was carried off by the Nile's current, she set forth on a journey that would test every part of her being, her love, her endurance, her very soul. Imagine her now, walking alone along the banks of the river. The night air is cool, the moon lays a silver path across the water, and the reeds sway as though whispering secrets. Each step is heavy with grief, yet she does not stop. She cannot. Her husband, her partner, her king, is lost to the river, and only she has the will to find him. Villagers watched her pass, sometimes from the shadows of mud brick homes, sometimes pausing at their ovens or fields. They lowered their voices, whispering prayers as Isis moved through their midst. For though she was a goddess, she was also a woman, her veil damp with tears, her eyes hollow with loss. Mothers touched their children's hair, women pressed a hand to their own hearts, seeing in Isis their own reflection. To love deeply is to risk deep sorrow, and in her wandering, they saw their own resilience. The Nile carried her on. Day after day, she searched, calling Osiris's name. Can you hear her voice? Low and steady at first, then breaking, then gathering strength again. It rose over the water like birdsong, drifted through villages, and echoed across the barren desert. Her grief was not quiet. It was fierce, relentless, like the flood that returns each year no matter how many times it has retreated. You could almost feel the world around her as she walked. The hot winds of the desert blew sand across her path, stinging her skin, but she pressed forward. The reeds along the water bent low as if bowing to her sorrow. At dawn, the air was fresh with the smell of damp soil and lotus blooms, while at night the desert carried a chill that cut through her thin garments. And always, the sound of the river accompanied her, rushing, gurgling, whispering of hidden things. She must have wondered if Osiris could hear her. Did his spirit know she searched for him? Did he feel her devotion even from within the coffin's darkness? The myth does not tell us, but perhaps, as she spoke his name, some echo reached him, the bond between them refusing to break even in death. Her journey was not without despair. There were moments when her feet faltered, when her sobs broke her strength, when the weight of her loneliness pressed her to the ground. But still, she rose again. For grief is not a straight path. It is stumbling, collapsing, then standing once more, because love does not let us stay fallen for long. And so Isis became more than a goddess in this wandering. She became a symbol of persistence. Every woman who has sat by a sick child's bed through the night, every widow who has risen at dawn to work fields alone, every sister who has carried water for her family despite weary arms, they all lived in her story. She was their mirror. Her pain was divine, but her endurance was human. Picture her resting by the river at dusk. The horizon glows red and gold, the air cools, and she dips her hands into the water. The ripples spread outward, catching light like shattered stars. She drinks, she breathes, she gathers strength. Perhaps she thinks of the days when she and Osiris walked together through green fields, when laughter was easy, when their people thrived. Memory becomes her lantern, guiding her through the darkness. The villagers helped where they could. Some left food along her path, bread still warm from ovens, jars of beer cool from the cellar. Others whispered prayers at their doorways as she passed, asking the gods to give her strength. They could not carry her grief, but they could share in her endurance, drawing courage from her footsteps. Her wandering was long, and each mile seemed endless. Yet every step carried her closer to Osiris, though she did not know it. In the rhythm of her feet on soil, in the rhythm of her breath and her tears, she wove together sorrow and hope. She taught her people that love is not only the joy of union, but the labor of devotion, the choice to continue even when the world seemed broken. It is said, she searched across the length of the Nile, through marshes and deserts, through villages and empty stretches of wilderness. She became a figure etched into the landscape itself, her grief as much a part of Egypt as the river, the sand, the stars. Wherever you walk, even now, along the ancient banks, perhaps her footsteps linger in the dust. The strength of Isis is not in victory, but in persistence. She was not granted ease. She was not spared pain. Instead, she endured, she searched, she wept, and still she moved forward. In this, she becomes the heart of the myth, not only a goddess but a lesson in human resilience. As you sit with her story, ask yourself, what is it that carries you through your own heavy days? Is it memory? Is it love? Is it the belief that somewhere, beyond the sorrow, you will find what you are searching for? For Isis, it was all these things: the memory of Osiris's touch, the love they shared, the certainty that their bond was not broken, only hidden, waiting to be found again. As Isis wandered, she carried both sorrow and hope. What gives you strength when your heart feels heavy? There are moments in every story when despair seems too deep to rise from, when loss feels final, unyielding. And yet, in the tale of Isis and Osiris, we are reminded that love can reach beyond even the silence of death. After long days of wandering, after nights spent calling his name into the desert winds, Isis's search finally brought her to the place where the coffin of Osiris had come to rest. It was said that the chest had floated downstream, carried by the steady current of the Nile, until it reached the shore of Byblos, where it became lodged in the trunk of a growing tree. The tree, as though sensing the sacredness of what it embraced, wrapped its wood around the chest, encasing Osiris in its heart. There, hidden but preserved, he lay until Isis's footsteps at last brought her to that place. Imagine her as she found him. The sun dipping low, painting the sky with bands of crimson and gold. The smell of salt in the air as the river widened toward the sea. Villagers nearby had whispered of the miraculous tree, tall and proud, and Isis felt in her heart that this was no accident. Her grief had carried her here, her devotion had guided her feet, and now her trembling hands reached for the chest that held her beloved. When she opened it, her cries broke the stillness. There lay Osiris, cold and silent, yet still noble, still her husband, her king. She threw herself upon him, weeping, her tears soaking into his skin, her voice trembling with words of love and longing. This was not the reunion she had dreamed of, but it was reunion nonetheless. And from that moment, her grief transformed into action. Isis was not only a wife, but a goddess of magic, skilled in arts that wove life and death together like threads. With care, with patience, she gathered Osiris's body. In some tellings, Set had already desecrated it, cutting it into pieces and scattering them across the land. In others, the body lay whole but lifeless. Whichever version you imagine, Isis's task was the same: to gather, to mend, to restore. You can see her by the riverbank, laying out the fragments of her beloved. The desert wind brushed her hair across her face, the reeds whispered around her, the stars shone down like countless watchful eyes. One by one, she placed the pieces together, binding them with linen, weaving magic into every knot. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, as though every word of her spell was both prayer and promise. She sang over him, the kind of song that mothers sing to children, gentle and low, carrying love with every note. She spoke words of power, words that stitched not only flesh but spirit, calling back the essence of Osiris from the silence beyond. Her breath became his breath, her tears became his blood. With every touch, she willed him to return, not fully, not as he once was, but enough to hold her once more. And so it was. Osiris stirred. His chest rose, his eyes flickered open, and for a brief, tender moment, husband and wife were reunited. He could not remain among the living forever. His destiny was to rule in the realm beyond, to guide souls through the afterlife. But in that moment, Isis's love pulled him across the threshold of death, just long enough for their bond to be sealed anew. From that union came Horus, the falcon child, symbol of continuity, of hope, of the future. Though Osiris could no longer walk the earth, his legacy lived on in Horus, who would grow to avenge his father and restore balance to the world. For the Egyptians who told this story by firelight, Horus was not only a god but a reminder that life does not end with death. It changes, transforms, carries forward in new forms. This was the heart of Egyptian belief, that death was not an end but a passage. The soul did not vanish, it journeyed to another realm, guided by Osiris himself, judged fairly, and given the chance to live again in the field of reeds, a place of eternal harvest, eternal peace. Just as Isis revived Osiris, so too did every family hope their loved ones would be revived beyond the veil, welcomed into a life free of hunger, free of sorrow. Imagine sitting in your village, hearing this story spoken under the stars. The grief of Isis would echo in your own heart, but so too would her triumph. For if even death could not silence love, if even the grave could not end the bond between husband and wife, then perhaps your own bonds were just as eternal. The idea soothed fears, eased the sting of loss, and wrapped listeners in the comfort of hope. Isis's song, her magic, her tears, all became symbols of resilience. She did not give up when despair pressed against her. She did not turn away when the body of her beloved lay lifeless. Instead, she faced the darkness, stitched light back into it, and gave Egypt a story of rebirth that would endure for millennia. When you close your eyes, you can almost see her kneeling by Osiris, stars glimmering above her, the desert stretching endlessly around. The air is cool, scented with lotus blossoms. The river whispers softly, carrying with it the memory of his coffin's long journey. And there she is, whispering spells, weaving hope into the night. The Egyptians who told this tale found comfort in it not only as myth, but as mirror. For how many times had they themselves laid loved ones to rest, wrapped in linen, adorned with amulets, prayers whispered over them? How many times had they trusted that, like Osiris, their beloved dead would rise again in another world? To tell of Isis reviving Osiris was to remind themselves that every burial was not a goodbye, but a doorway. Rebirth was not always grand. Sometimes it was gentle, quiet, like the sprouting of a seed after the floodwaters receded. Sometimes it was like the birth of a child, fragile and miraculous all at once. Sometimes it was like the rising of the sun after the longest night. And in all these forms, the people saw themselves reflected in Isis's devotion. The thought that life continues in new forms brought comfort to Egyptians. Does this idea soothe you too? Horus was born not into peace, but into the shadow of grief. His father, Osiris, ruled no longer among the living but in the quiet depths of the afterlife. His mother, Isis, carried him in secret, protecting him from Set's wrath. And so the child who would become Egypt's hope first opened his eyes, under the veil of danger, nurtured by a mother whose love had already carried her through endless sorrow. Imagine Isis cradling the infant Horus by the banks of the Nile. The reeds swayed gently around them, offering both shelter and song. She nursed him in whispers, always alert to footsteps, always wary of the jealous eyes of Set. For Set, knowing that Horus was the child of Osiris, feared what his future might bring. He would have destroyed him if he could. But Isis, resourceful and tender, hid her son away, raising him in places where the desert met the river, where the stars could watch over them both. In this image, Horus is more than a falcon-headed god. He is every child born into uncertainty, every fragile hope carried by mothers through times of danger. His infancy reflected the truth known to every family, that the future is always fragile, yet worth every act of care and protection. The Egyptians told his story not only as myth but as reassurance. The struggles of the present, no matter how sharp, could give rise to renewal. As Horus grew, the weight of destiny pressed upon him. He was not only a son mourning his father, but the embodiment of Egypt's longing for balance. Where Set represented chaos, Horus stood for renewal. Their conflict, though told in tales of battles and contests, was more than a story of weapons and wounds. It was a reflection of life itself, the push and pull between order and disorder, between justice and envy, between harmony and destruction. When Egyptians spoke of their struggle, they imagined the two locked in combat. Sometimes they pictured them fighting as men, sometimes as animals, falcon against serpent, strength against cunning. But always, behind the imagery, the meaning remained clear. It was Egypt's soul that was being fought for. The question was not whether Horus could defeat Set with force, but whether harmony could ever triumph over discord, whether the fragile balance of life could be restored after betrayal. In the stories, the battle was long, stretching not just for days but for years. Horus, with the guidance of Isis, faced Set again and again. Each contest tested not only his strength but his patience, his wisdom, his capacity to embody Ma'at, the principle of order and truth. At times he was wounded, his eye struck, his body battered. But even in these wounds, Egyptians found meaning. The eye of Horus, torn and later healed, became a symbol of protection, of wholeness restored after brokenness. To look upon that symbol was to be reminded that even what is damaged can be made whole again. Picture yourself as an Egyptian villager listening to this story under the glow of firelight. The details of combat might stir your imagination, but what lingers in your heart is something gentler. The reassurance that chaos does not last forever. That for every desert wind that scorches the fields, the Nile will return with its life-giving flood. That for every sorrow, a moment of joy waits beyond it. Horus's struggle was not only his own, but the eternal struggle of every generation, every household, every soul. And though Isis could not fight in her son's place, she stood beside him with unwavering devotion. She whispered guidance, offered healing, and became again the mirror of every mother who strengthens her child for life's trials. Her role in the battle was not one of weapons, but of wisdom, proving that resilience often comes not from force, but from love. At last, after countless trials, Horus was declared the rightful heir of Osiris. The gods themselves weighed the matter, and justice was given. Set would no longer rule unchecked. Order, though hard one, was restored. Egypt could look to Horus as a king, a guardian, a falcon soaring high above the land, watching with sharp eyes, protecting with steady wings. For the Egyptians, this was never merely a tale of family rivalry. It was reassurance that their world was not abandoned to chaos. The balance of the Nile's floods and the desert's dryness, the balance of life and death, the balance of joy and sorrow, all were reflected in Horus's triumph. The story told them that no matter how long chaos seemed to rule, order would rise again, just as surely as the sun returned each morning after the darkest night. When you think of Horus and Set, do not picture only a violent struggle. Picture instead the scales of balance tipping back toward harmony, the quiet relief of a people who once again trusted in stability. Picture families planting crops with hope, children running freely in the dust, priests raising prayers of gratitude in temples filled with incense and song. Horus's victory was not a shout but a sigh, the sigh of a people who could breathe easier, who could believe again in the rhythm of life. Every age has its struggles between order and chaos. What do you think balance looks like in your own life? When the story of Osiris reaches this point, it does not end with loss. It does not close with silence or despair. Instead, the Egyptians believed Osiris had simply taken on a new role, one that was perhaps greater than any throne upon the earth. Though his body had been torn and his time among the living cut short, he was not gone. He had become something enduring, something eternal, the Lord of the afterlife, the gentle ruler of the land beyond. Imagine for a moment what it meant for ordinary Egyptians to hear this. Life in their villages was full of toil, sowing fields, grinding grain, raising children, and offering prayers for the flood of the Nile. Illness could come without warning, and accidents in farming or building could steal away loved ones swiftly. Death was never far, never a stranger. Yet in the figure of Osiris, they found comfort. He was not a god distant or cold. He had lived, he had suffered, he had been betrayed, and still he endured. If such a one now presided over the realm of the dead, then perhaps death itself was not something to fear. The Egyptians imagined the afterlife as a journey, one that began when a person's breath left their body. The soul, or Ba, would rise and seek its path into the world beyond. There were rivers to cross, gates to pass, guardians to appease. Yet the heart of this journey was a single moment, one every Egyptian carried in their imagination, the weighing of the heart. In the Hall of Truth, the heart of the deceased was set upon scales. On the other side lay a feather, the feather of Ma'at, symbol of truth and cosmic balance. If the heart was heavy with wrong, it would sink lower, betraying the burdens of dishonesty, cruelty, or greed. But if it was light, balanced against truth, then the soul could walk onward into eternal fields of peace. And who stood to preside over this? Who received each heart with patience and fairness? It was Osiris, seated upon his throne, crowned in white and green. His crook and flail across his chest, his gaze both merciful and wise. Picture him not as stern judge, but as a figure of understanding. After all, Osiris himself had known suffering. He had known betrayal, death, and the longing for renewal. When Egyptians pictured their hearts upon the scale, they did not imagine themselves judged by a stranger. They imagined standing before a God who had walked close to their own human experience, one who would see not only their failings, but also their struggles, their griefs, and their quiet acts of goodness. And what awaited those whose hearts were found true? The stories spoke of fields that never failed, harvests without end, rivers that glistened in eternal light. The afterlife, for Egyptians, was not an alien world of clouds or shadows. It was an ideal Egypt perfected. Green fields stretched endlessly, the Nile flowed with generosity, bread rose warm from countless ovens, and families reunited without fear of loss. To imagine this was to soothe the sharp edge of mortality, to believe that the hardships of earthly life would one day give way to peace. Even those who feared their hearts might be heavy could take comfort in the rituals of their faith. Prayers, offerings, careful preparation of the body, these were not mere customs, but acts of hope woven into daily life. A mother might whisper to her child that Osiris would welcome them when their time came. A farmer might look at the river's flood and think of Osiris's promise of renewal. The myth was not only told in temples, but lived in kitchens, in fields, and in quiet nights by the fire. Osiris's presence was not confined to tombs or scrolls. He was seen in the green shoots rising after the flood, in the steady rhythm of death and life returning. Every time grain sprouted from dark earth, it was Osiris reborn. Every time the Nile receded, leaving fertile soil behind, it was his reminder that life springs forth even from loss. To the Egyptians, he was not simply ruler of the dead, but guardian of life's eternal cycles. Think of the reassurance this offered. Death did not mean disappearance. It meant transformation, a passage into the care of one who had walked that very path before. Families could believe that when they buried their loved ones with amulets and prayers, those beloved souls would not wander alone. They would be welcomed into Osiris's presence, their hearts weighed gently, their journeys guided with mercy. Even now, to imagine Osiris seated upon his throne brings a kind of calm. His skin the color of fertile green, his crown gleaming with tall white plumes, he embodies both the quiet dignity of the earth and the vastness of eternity. Around him stand the gods who assist in judgment, yet it is his face that matters most, the face of one who proves that death is not an end but a continuation, a new form of life beyond the horizon of the living. And so, the Egyptians did not dread speaking of death. They prepared for it, honored it, and folded it into their vision of existence. To live well was to keep the heart light. To die was to walk into Osiris's care. To believe in Osiris was to find courage in the face of what could not be avoided. The myth of Isis and Osiris, from betrayal to resurrection, was not just a tale of gods, but a map of human longing. It spoke of grief and healing, of loss and renewal, of balance restored after chaos. And in its closing, it gave the greatest comfort of all, the assurance that no life was truly lost, no love truly broken. All things, in time, returned to Osiris, and through him, to eternity. The Egyptians believed that no life was truly lost. If you could ask Osiris one question about the afterlife, what would it be? The day has ended. Imagine yourself standing by the Nile, as the last light of the sun fades into twilight. The air is warm but soft, carrying the gentle scent of damp earth after irrigation, mingled with the faint smoke of evening hearths. Villagers finish their tasks, calling to one another in low voices, gathering children close. Soon, silence will cover the land except for the rustle of reeds and the lapping of water against the shore. Above, stars slowly prick the sky, their glow reflected in the river's surface as though the heavens and the Nile were in quiet conversation. It is in such a moment, beneath the vastness of night, that stories were told. Stories of gods and love, of betrayal and hope, of the fragile but enduring thread of life. Tonight, the tale that has unfolded is that of Isis and Osiris, a story carried across thousands of years, from mouths by firelight to carvings on temple walls, from ancient villages to our quiet imaginations now. Perhaps you can feel how close it still is, as though the voices of those long gone still murmur just beyond the night breeze. Think back to where we began. You stood in an Egyptian village at the edge of the Nile, the moon above, the rhythm of crickets and frogs reminding you that life never truly sleeps. You became one with the people of that time, women baking bread, men tending fields, children splashing by the river. You breathed their air, carried their burdens, shared their fears and hopes. The story of Isis and Osiris was not distant to them. It was woven into their very lives. We met Isis, the goddess whose wisdom and devotion made her more than a figure of myth. She was the protector of women, mothers, wives, and the vulnerable. We saw Osiris, gentle king and teacher, who brought abundance, order, and justice. Together they represented harmony, the kind of balance humans long for in every age. And then we felt the shadow creep in, Set, jealous and restless, unable to bear his brother's light. The tale turned from peace to betrayal, and in that moment of trickery, when Osiris was sealed in the chest, the heart of the story cracked. Through Isis's eyes, we shared grief. She wandered along riverbanks and deserts, her sorrow like a cloak about her shoulders. And yet, she never stopped. With every whisper of reed and every prayer of those who loved her, she pressed on. Her persistence mirrored that of countless women across time who hold families together, who carry pain but keep moving forward. We reached the tender reunion where love overcame despair. Piece by piece, Isis restored Osiris, calling him back to life, if only for a moment. From that love was born Horus, the promise that hope does not vanish, but changes form, taking root in the next generation. Renewal rose from brokenness, like green shoots after floodwaters recede. Horus then faced sat in the struggle for Egypt's soul, a struggle not of violence alone, but of meaning. Chaos and order, destruction and renewal, forever at odds, forever in balance. The Egyptians did not see this as a simple battle, but as a reflection of the eternal rhythm of life. And through Horus's triumph, they believed that balance, though shaken, would always be restored. And finally, Osiris took his place as ruler of the afterlife. He did not vanish into death, but transformed into its gentle master, a figure who could meet each soul with mercy. Egyptians knew they would one day stand before him, their hearts weighed, their lives seen for what they truly were. But this did not fill them with dread. Instead, it brought comfort. For Osiris was no stranger. He had walked the path of suffering. He had known love and loss. To be judged by him was to be seen by one who understood. And now, as you stand once more beneath the Egyptian night sky, perhaps you can feel the story resting gently upon you. Love, betrayal, grief, resilience, renewal, balance, and hope, these are not only the bones of myth, but the very substance of human life. We live them still, in different forms, with different names, in different lands. Every culture has its tales, but beneath them all are the same questions. How do we endure loss? How do we hold on to love? How do we find balance when chaos presses in? And where do we find hope for what lies beyond? The Egyptians answered through Isis and Osiris. For them, the story was more than entertainment. It was a reassurance whispered against the darkness. It told them that love is stronger than death, that betrayal can be healed through resilience, that balance always returns, and that no life is ever truly lost. Perhaps you find echoes of your own journey here. Perhaps there are moments in your life that felt like betrayal, or times when grief felt like wandering through deserts alone. Perhaps there have been times when renewal came unexpectedly, like tender green shoots breaking through hard ground. The story of Isis and Osiris belongs not only to Egypt, but to anyone who has lived through loss and found, in time, a measure of peace. Now the stars are high above the Nile. The water flows on, steady and eternal, as though carrying with it the memory of every life that has touched its banks. In the hush of this moment, you can almost hear the soft voices of those ancient villagers as they lean close around the glow of a fire, listening to this very tale. Their worries may have been different, but their hearts were much like yours. They, too, long for comfort, for meaning, for the assurance that love endures and life continues. And so, we come gently to the close of this journey. We leave Isis and Osiris where they belong, in the timeless space between myth and memory, between history and dream. But their story lingers, like the afterglow of a fire, like the reflection of stars upon the Nile. It offers us something to carry into our own nights, the reminder that even in loss, there is renewal. Even in darkness, there is balance waiting to return. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. If this story soothed you, you might share it with someone you care for, or simply rest now, knowing these ancient voices keep us company still. Sleep well, under your own night sky. May peace, like the Nile's eternal flow, carry you gently into dreams.